Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, honoring the sacrifices of America's fallen service members. President Trump gives a Memorial Day address at the Arlington National Cemetery. Iris Tao tells us what he says about the country's direction and upcoming plans to celebrate the military in Washington, D.C. The Defense Department releases an eye-catching recruiting video featuring narration from the president. And Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth marks Memorial Day by cleaning the Korean War Memorial and delivering remarks. Jason Blair has that story. President Trump continues trying to stop the fighting between Russia and Ukraine. We have the latest on the peace efforts. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem in Israel to attend a memorial ceremony for 2 embassy staffers recently killed in D.C. Meanwhile, an Israeli airstrike hits a shelter building in the Gaza Strip that was reportedly used by terrorists. Jason Perry reports. DOGE reports billions of Medicaid dollars may be slipping through the cracks due to fraud and abuse. Now, new rules could require many recipients to work or volunteer to keep their benefits. Christina Corona takes a closer look.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump honors the sacrifices of fallen soldiers and their families in his Memorial Day address at Arlington National Cemetery. He also highlights plans for the upcoming military parade to mark the 250th birthday of the United States Army. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has more.
We salute them in their eternal and everlasting glory.
Standing before the rows of white marble headstones at Arlington National Cemetery, President Trump delivers his first Memorial Day address of his second term, honoring the sacrifice of fallen American soldiers.
America's best and America's bravest have fought, bled, and died so that we could pick up the torch of liberty, raise it high, 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 and carry it onward to places they could never have dreamed of before.
The 156th National Memorial Day ceremony began with a traditional wreath-laying ceremony at the tomb of the unknown soldier. More than 1 million men and women have died while serving the military since the Civil War began in 1861. Trump memorializing the names and stories of those who made the ultimate sacrifice, including the first soldiers who died at Bunker Hill in 1775 before the nation even got its name.
Their valor gave us the freest, greatest, and most noble republic ever to exist on the face of the earth, a republic that I am fixing after a long and hard 4 years. That was a hard 4 years we went through.
The president also honors Gold Star families sitting in the audience, thanking them and many more for giving America the brightest light in their lives.
The empty space at Sunday dinner, or the want of a hug or a pat on the back that will never come again. Every Gold Star family fights a battle long after the victory is won, and today, we lift you up and we hold you high.
And this Memorial Day, Trump says, holds special significance as it marks 250 years since the first American patriots gave their lives for independence. He highlights an upcoming military parade and says it's God who arranged for it to happen during his current term.
I'm glad I missed that second term where it was, because I wouldn't be your president. Amazing the way things work out. God did that. I believe that, too.
Before heading to the Arlington National Cemetery, President Trump wrote a flurry of posts on Truth Social, criticizing judges who are blocking his administration's agenda. He says he hopes that the Supreme Court and compassionate judges will protect this country from what he calls harmful decisions. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
The Department of Defense releases a new military recruiting ad this Memorial Day. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth participated in cleaning the Korean War Memorial over the weekend. And today joined President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance to honor service members who made the ultimate sacrifice. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
We don't fight because we hate what's in front of us. We fight because we love what's behind us.
A new military recruitment ad was debuted at the NASCAR Coca-Cola 600. It features voice clips from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and President Trump.
We will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars we end, and perhaps most importantly, the wars we never get into. It's called peace through strength.
Seth wrote on X underneath the ad, "We are laser focused on our mission of warfighting. DOD is done with wokeness."
So on this Memorial Day, in honor of the unknown soldiers and the known, let us rededicate ourselves to God and country.
Hegseth also gave remarks at Arlington National Cemetery commemorating soldiers who died serving their country.
These men died for something, the hope of a free, secure, and peaceful republic. That is our inheritance, and we must steward it and hand it down to our kids and our grandkids. We must live worthy of it.
President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance also gave remarks, and all three participated in a wreath ceremony and salute. And over the weekend, Hegseth, along with his family, cleaned the Korean War Memorial in Washington, D.C., also in remembrance of the fallen servicemen and women. He wrote on X, "We will never forget those who paid the ultimate price for our freedoms." Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
President Trump continues trying to stop the fighting between Russia and Ukraine. So far, the conflict doesn't appear to be calming down. Here's the latest.
We're in the middle of talking, and he's shooting rockets into Kiev and other cities. I don't like it at all.
President Trump on Monday saying he's still trying to get a peace deal in Ukraine. That's as Russia is striking military targets in Ukraine in response to Ukrainian attacks.
We see how the Ukrainians are striking our social infrastructure, peaceful infrastructure facilities. This is a retaliatory strike, and a strike precisely at military facilities, at military targets.
Russia now claims that President Trump is being emotional.
This is a very crucial moment, which is associated with the emotional overload of everyone absolutely and with emotional reactions. We follow this very closely.
But Trump returned the allegations, saying Russian President Vladimir Putin is acting emotional. The president says that something has happened to him. He has gone absolutely crazy. He is needlessly killing a lot of people. But on a positive note, Kiev and Moscow managed to exchange 1,000 prisoners of war from each side. That's according to Ukraine's defense minister, who represented Ukraine at the talks. Russia confirmed the exchange.
Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem was in Israel today. She attended a memorial ceremony for 2 embassy staffers who were recently killed in Washington, D.C. Meanwhile, Israeli forces reported striking a building that was used to shelter displaced Palestinians, saying it was being used by terrorists. NTD's Jason Perry has the latest.
On Monday, a memorial ceremony was held in Jerusalem for 2 embassy staffers recently killed in a terrorist attack in Washington, D.C. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem said President Trump asked her to go to Israel after the tragic shooting.
Today we stand together with profound grief, and our hearts are heavy with the loss of these 2 radiant souls that we will no longer have with us. Their lives were so full of promise and love and dedication, and may they be an inspiration to us of how to live our daily lives as well.
Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar also mentioned Trump while speaking at the ceremony.
President Trump and his administration show great commitment to fighting terrorism and anti-Semitism. I believe your visit here is part of it. We truly appreciate that.
Noem also met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and the Israeli government said that Noem expressed appreciation for how Netanyahu is conducting the war. On Monday, Israeli forces said they killed dozens of terrorists over the past week and dismantled terrorist infrastructure. Israel also said that 3 projectiles were fired from the Gaza Strip towards Israel, 2 of which came down in the Gaza Strip, while the 3rd was intercepted by the Israeli Air Force. The Israeli Air Force also struck a building that was being used to shelter displaced residents in the Gaza Strip. Israel said terrorists were using the building as a command and control center. Israel also reported taking steps before the strike to mitigate harm to civilians. A displaced resident shared her thoughts.
Suddenly, we found rubble above our heads. This one came out from under the rubble. I came out from under the rubble. Our nerves are damaged. We're exhausted. We're tired.
On the same day in Israel, the cousin of a deceased hostage also expressed concerns over Israeli airstrikes.
Idan Alexander, who was released 2 weeks ago, told his family he was nearly killed in an Israeli strike. Have you learned nothing? Stop this war. Expending military pressure is a death sentence for hostages.
On Sunday, President Trump said there could be some good news about the situation in the Gaza Strip, and he said he wants to, quote, see if we can stop that whole situation as quickly as possible. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Dr. Mehmet Oz says that his agency, along with DOGE, has uncovered billions of dollars in Medicaid waste, fraud, and abuse. He's now calling for stricter oversight and work requirements to qualify for benefits. NTD's Christina Corona has more.
Dr. Mehmet Oz, who heads the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, told Fox News that the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, has found at least $14 billion lost to fraud, waste, and abuse at his agency. He says some people are enrolled in Medicaid in multiple states, each of which is billing the federal government. Oz also pointed out that some able-bodied individuals and even illegal immigrants are receiving Medicaid when they shouldn't. He's calling for stricter oversight and a work requirement to qualify. Oz says Medicaid should be focused on helping truly vulnerable Americans like people with disabilities. A House bill that's now in the hands of the Senate would add work requirements for Medicaid and increase them for food assistance. Supporters say this would save money and encourage personal responsibility. The bill would require many Medicaid enrollees under 65 to work, volunteer, or go to school to keep their coverage starting next year. So far, only Arkansas has enforced a work rule that removes coverage from people who don't comply. Christina Corona, NTD News.
House Republicans celebrated last week after passing their big budget bill, but some GOP senators say the celebrations came too soon. They warned that the budget's impact on the debt means it's not going to make it far in the upper chamber without big changes. NTD's Melina Weiskup reports.
The bill is passed.
House Speaker Mike Johnson over the weekend took a victory lap after passing the GOP's massive budget bill.
It's the most consequential legislation that Congress will pass in many generations, and it's a long time coming.
It makes Trump's 2017 tax cuts permanent, eliminates tax on tips, and boosts funding for the Pentagon and Trump's immigration efforts, all while making controversial changes to Medicaid and SNAP benefits, a piece Democrats are honing in on in opposition.
Now Trump and his allies are going to cut Medicaid, and it's going to drive a lot of these providers out of business.
Republicans don't need Democrats' support to pass the budget in the Senate, but some Republican votes are already off the table due to the bill's $4 trillion debt limit increase.
And borrowing this money just isn't fiscally conservative. I've told them I can support the package if they separate the debt ceiling off and have a separate vote on that. I want nothing to do with that. I didn't vote for the spending. I didn't vote for the debt.
A Congressional Budget Office report predicts that the House's budget will add nearly $3.8 trillion to the deficit over 10 years. The House Speaker denies the report over the weekend, touting the spending cuts.
We're going to cut over $1.5 trillion in spending, and it's a big leap forward. The last time we had a spending cut was 3 decades ago, and it was only $800 billion. Even adjusted for inflation, this is the biggest spending cut, I think, in the history of government on planet Earth. Now, is it enough? Of course not. But we have a very delicate balance, and we have to start the process.
Republican Senator Ron Johnson, though, says there are enough GOP senators in opposition to stop the process entirely until more spending changes are made.
One of my disappointments with what the House process is about, the only number we ever heard about was $1.5 trillion, which sounds like a lot, but it's only $150 billion per year. And this is put in context of the fact that in 2019, we spent $4.4 trillion. This year we'll spend over $7 trillion.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune can only afford to lose 3 Republican votes to pass the bill, and he's already vowed to make sweeping changes to it. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
Former New York Congressman Charles Rangel has died at the age of 94. He represented Harlem in Congress for over 40 years and was known as the Lion of Lenox Avenue. Rangel served in the U.S. Army from 1948 through 1952 and received a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star with Valor for his efforts in Korea. In 1961, he was named Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. 5 years later, Rangel's political career began as a New York State lawmaker. In 1970, he was elected to the U.S. House to represent New York's 18th District to begin a 23-term run. During his time in Congress, Rangel took on many roles. He was on the House Judiciary Committee during President Richard Nixon's impeachment hearings. Rangel became a member of the House Ways and Means Committee in 1975, years later rising to chairman of the panel. He also co-founded and chaired the Congressional Black Caucus. Rangel retired from Congress in 2017. Coming up, cities across America honor and remember those who've died in service to our country. We have the highlights from an event at the Intrepid Museum here in New York City, the annual Memorial Day Parade in our national capital, and a ceremony from San Jose, California. Stay tuned for that and more after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A moving Memorial Day tribute at the Intrepid Museum in New York City as 4 wreaths were placed in the Hudson River to honor fallen service members. The ceremony marked the end of Fleet Week and featured a 100-foot flag and a Navy jet flyover. NTD's Chris Bob has more.
As the 37th Fleet Week comes to a close here in New York, New Yorkers gathered to commemorate Memorial Day. Among the civic and military leaders in attendance were New York City Mayor Eric Adams and Admiral Daryl Caudle, commander of the U.S. Fleet Forces Command.
And the way you don't forget is to exercise your mental memory, to constantly have it exercised so our children would understand where they live and who they are. And we can't do that if on our college campuses we're radicalizing our children to hate America instead of to embrace the America. We need to engage our young people so that they can too build up our bench to build our strong military services. And what does that look like? Let's start with doing the Pledge of Allegiance again in our schools so we can understand the word of what it is to be pledged in allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Let's start by not only talking about Memorial Day, but also encouraging our young people the beauty of being part of the military services.
Our solemn promise is this: we will ensure that today's warfighters, like those who came before them, remain the most capable, courageous, and committed defenders of freedom the world has ever known, ready to deter those who wish to do our nation harm, and fight victoriously should that deterrence fail. May we all find strength from the deepest depths of our resolve to support and enable their noble duty, so that they may carry on their proud legacy. To everyone here today and to the Americans across the globe, on behalf of service members and their families, thank you.
Rear Admiral Carl Lady reflected on the meaning of this day, honoring the fallen and sharing his own family's deep ties to military service.
Memorial Day is a solemn time where I can reflect on the sacrifice given by over 41 million Americans who gave their lives that we might be free today. I think about the veterans that have served that were my family members. Fortunately, none of them have died in conflict, but I have a long history of service within my family, so I have an opportunity to reflect on their service.
In a moving tribute, 4 ceremonial wreaths were placed into the Hudson River to honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice. Service members helped unfurl a 100-foot American flag, and the ceremony concluded with a breathtaking flyover by Navy fighter jets, a powerful salute to the fallen. Chris Bob, NTD News, New York.
This Memorial Day, thousands packing into Washington, D.C. to pay tribute to the men and women who died serving the nation. A parade featuring celebrities and musical performances reminds us about the cost of our freedom. NTD's Sam Wong has the story.
Floats, marching bands, and patriotic music. America's largest Memorial Day parade returning to Constitution Avenue in downtown Washington, D.C. Spectators packing into every available space, a somber yet celebratory occasion honored by Americans from all walks of life.
We wouldn't get to do what we love every single day if it weren't for the men and women that are sacrificing for us. So just being able to honor them in this way here in D.C. is unbelievable.
Servicemen and women are the real-life superheroes, so we're just grateful to be here, be a part of it, and do what we can and be a small part of Memorial Day.
All gave some, but some gave all. Legendary rock icon Gene Simmons shares a personal connection to the holiday. Riding alongside a World War II veteran, Simmons is honoring a hero who helped liberate a concentration camp in Nazi Germany where his mother was held.
I can't tell you how much this means to me. I'm not doing this for me, it's for my mom and the military. And I'll be sharing the stage and the float with Sergeant Urban, who's 100 years old, standing straight up, and he's got a vice grip.
Simmons said paying tribute to fallen service members goes beyond Memorial Day.
Mr. Simmons, what does Memorial Day mean to you personally?
Memorial Day should be an everyday event as far as I'm concerned. Why look at the calendar to figure out when you should honor our troops? If you're standing in line at a Starbucks and somebody's in uniform in back of you, for heaven's sakes, get out of the way and make way for a real hero.
Once a rifleman on the battlefield, country star Scotty Hastings narrowly escaped death after getting shot 10 times in Afghanistan. He's now finding refuge in music and is working to help other veterans who are suffering from PTSD.
The music heals. It absolutely saved my life, and it gave me a way to escape my PTSD, depression, and anxiety. And I hope that, with my platform and with my story and with my music, someone hears it and it helps them in some way, shape, or form. I have some of the greatest people I've ever known didn't come home, and yet I feel today so hard. And I think it's important for people to understand and remember and celebrate those people.
This Memorial Day, we're reminded that while freedom may not carry a price tag, it comes at a great cost. America will always remember the sacrifices made by the brave men and women who served our country. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Sam Wang, NTD News.
And over on the West Coast, many communities are also marking Memorial Day with tributes to those who gave their lives in military service. NTD's David Lamb brings us more from California.
For Memorial Day, many families, veterans, and locals came out in San Jose, California. Now, this is the Oak Hill Funeral Home and Memorial Park in the South Bay. Let's hear what people have to say what Memorial Day means to them.
Yes. Memorial Day is a day where I get to come assist and help out this beautiful park over here and commemorate the fallen heroes and those who are still standing with us. I get to help out, give my part, give my day to these people.
Memorial Day is a day that I spend reflecting on the sacrifice of the men and women that have given their lives in service of this great country.
I always like to come out here to really honor Memorial Day and those who volunteered to serve in the military and gave their lives. It's truly a solemn day, and this day became a lot more real to me about 4 or 5 years ago when I unfortunately saw the Afghanistan withdrawal and 13 servicemen and women alongside 150 or more Afghan civilians lost their lives in that withdrawal. The thing that most impacted me actually was many of them, the servicemen and women, were my age, in their 20s, or even slightly older or younger.
It was a solemn event today as locals, dignitaries, and military service people came together.
Basically, when I was a young teenager, I had some great leaders that helped adjust my moral compass so that it pointed in the right direction, and therefore my life path went in the right direction. And I wanted to pay that forward.
This is my mom before me. She was in the Army, and she did 20 years as part of the Army band and in the reserves. And she was my main inspiration for joining.
My great-grandfather was in World War II. He was injured in battle, returned, and went with a nurse. That's where he went. My great-great-grandmother. So they got married, and that's why I'm here. He walked 3 miles from his battle. He was in the Appalachian Islands. He walked 3 miles with a shot ankle all the way back to base where he could get medical assistance. And that's why the only reason I'm still here is because he walked 3 miles with a shot ankle.
And Memorial Day is observed on the last Monday in May every year. In San Jose, California, David Lamb, NTD News.
From the battlefield to the boardroom, how one Marine's sacrifice, service, and values continue to shape his mission. Arnold Pinaro reflects on the ambush that nearly took his life, the man who saved him, and the lessons learned growing up in a military family. From honoring sacrifice to preserving the American dream, hear why he says there's no greater calling than serving one's country. Tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Capitol Report. Coming up, FBI Director Kash Patel says the flow of fentanyl into the country is coming from America's northern neighbor, Canada. He says hostile regimes like Beijing, Tehran, and Moscow are working with criminal organizations to smuggle fentanyl across the northern border. Retired ICE Special Agent Victor Avila joins us to discuss. And COVID is surging again in China, with locals describing symptoms as a razor blade throat. Daniel Monahan brings us the details on that after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. FBI Director Kash Patel says the flow of fentanyl into the U.S. is coming from Canada. He told Fox News that hostile regimes like China, Russia, and Iran are partnering with cartels to smuggle the drug into the U.S. via Vancouver across America's northern border. That's after President Trump's efforts to seal the southern border with Mexico. Patel called on Canada to step in and do more to stem the flow. Joining us now to discuss is Victor Avila. He's a retired special agent with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Homeland Security Investigations. He's also the author of the book Agent Under Fire. Victor, thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you again. Now, FBI head Patel noting now that the southern border is shut down. Focus is now on the north, especially when it comes to fentanyl precursors originating from China. How successful do you think singling out Canada will be in stopping the flow from China there?
Well, it's important to do so. Let me tell you why the shift is happening from the southern border of Mexico into Canada. The number one seaport where the precursors for fentanyl comes in is in the port of Hermosillo, Mexico. That's southern. On the other side, a lot of people are not aware of that port. And there's another port there called Lázaro Cárdenas. That's where the majority of the precursors come into Mexico and then obviously get smuggled into the U.S. There's a lot of attention there right now. Mexico is stepping up their enforcements, and there's a lot of seizures happening. There's a lot of movement, as you can imagine. China has had a great presence in Mexico for a long time, and so they drop off the precursors, they take the steel and lumber back in these containers, and so now they're trying to figure out how do we get and continue to get the deadly fentanyl into the United States. By the way, methamphetamine and cocaine and other drugs as well. So let's move to the northern border where there's less activity, less law enforcement presence, and that's why the Trump administration wants to focus there.
Expanding on that, official data notes that only a small fraction of the fentanyl that came into the U.S. last year originated in Canada, the vast majority still from the southern border. Some note that the northern border is relatively unmonitored and easy to cross, suggesting that the volume of fentanyl coming from there could be higher. Now, given the efforts to seal the southern border, is Canada the new place for China to park its precursors?
Not quite yet. It's the arrangements that they have in Mexico, and obviously we can't ignore the corruption there and why the precursors and the chemicals get into Mexico. But as far as the easiness of bringing it into the northern border, absolutely. I mean, it's in between the ports of entry, but especially at the ports of entry, that's where we're seeing a lot of the traffic increase right now is coming through vehicle traffic, pedestrian traffic. The cartels are resorting back to their old ways of smuggling these drugs, especially when it comes to counterfeit pills, because they could be fit almost and turn into any kind of shape or form to be smuggled into the United States. And so it is we can't ignore Canada. I know sometimes we concentrate a lot on the southern border, but we still have to concentrate on Mexico because ultimately that's where the majority of these chemicals are being brought in, and the 100 super labs or so that the cartels have in Mexico are producing it. And then they might go around and circumvent the U.S. Or circumvent the southern U.S. border to come in through the northern border.
And Victor, when it comes to the scale of the operations in Canada, reports note around 100 organized crime groups are involved in fentanyl production. That's according to Canada's Financial Intelligence Agency. That number is 4 times higher than in 2022, and officials note it's only going up. Now, a spokesman for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, that's akin to our FBI, says most fentanyl is sold through the dark web and enters the U.S. through the Postal Service. How would the U.S. with Canada's new fentanyl SAR tackle something like that?
That's actually a great point because a lot of people, other than being smuggled, is people are being purchasing, especially our youth, fentanyl through the social media apps like Snapchat and others, Instagram, and getting access to it. But these labs that are being popped up in Canada is for the same reason of the enforcement that's happening right now and the attention at the southern border and in Mexico. And so the cartels are always trying to be 2 or 3 steps ahead of what's going to happen for them. And so the intelligence is what we need to gather on them because they're going to be very fluid. They're going to be moving, especially right now when they feel the pressure from the U.S., not just in Mexico, Canada, and abroad in 65 countries where these cartels are operating. And so getting a strong hold on it now before it expands, especially in Canada, is going to be very important for the border czar to look at.
And zooming out a bit here, there's a big focus on tariffs, especially the higher ones on China. Well, they've been lowered from the 145%. The baseline 30% includes a tariff for China's role in the fentanyl crisis in the U.S. How successful do you see the Trump administration using tariffs to pressure the Chinese regime over its role in the fentanyl crisis?
I think it's going to be tying all this back together. It really comes down to the tariffs. Mexico is trying to do their part to show the United States, look, we're partnering with you. We're on your side. We're going to do as much as we can to limit the drugs coming into Mexico that ultimately come into the U.S. But, and it's about those tariffs. It's about the amount of imports that come into Mexico from China. Let's not forget that. And what the United States needs to do to intercept that and kind of get in there and say, listen, if we're going to put some kind of either sanctions or raise these tariffs on China and Mexico wants to avoid it, they better step up their game to keep it from coming in the region to begin with, including Central and South America, because it's not just limited to Mexico. But this is a very key point that China has a high percentage of imports coming into Mexico that ultimately will affect us. And I hate to sound like a broken record here, but Mexico has a huge role to play with. And I think President Trump is right in the middle of it to deal with both, to see how this how these tariffs are going to end up playing a major role.
Now, when it comes to those fentanyl precursors, the Chinese regime denies involvement, laying the blame on the U.S. But many note this is part of China's unrestricted warfare or using drugs to kill Americans. Fentanyl is now the leading cause of death in Americans aged 18 to 45. The House Select Committee on the CCP released an investigation last year that stated the Chinese regime, quote, directly subsidizes the manufacturing and export of illicit fentanyl materials. What would it take to get the Chinese regime to stop the flow of fentanyl across the globe and into the U.S.?
Not only operations abroad, but within the United States, of those individuals already here promoting that they work hand in hand with these cartels. This is where you start looking at the cartels more as business people and the money launderers that they are. We're not talking about the guys shooting each other in Mexico. Those do exist, of course, and we have to worry about them. But it's the CPAs, the bankers that are highly infiltrated in this because it's generating billions of dollars. And I'm glad you brought up the stats because we're losing those number of Americans. Plus, here's another stat: 22 students a day. 22 American students a day to a deadly fentanyl poisoning. And it is eradicating and affecting our schools from a very young age now. The cartels are recruiting younger and younger individuals, smuggling them into the U.S., incorporating them into schools, into universities and colleges, enrolling them to continue to sell this deadly poison to our kids, and yes, killing them. Unfortunately, 65% of high school students still think that it's okay to take a pill that didn't come from the pharmacy. And this is the problem. We need an awareness. We need a public education campaign that hopefully will get to President Trump to implement, to at least educate the student and the parent to keep them from using it. That way it'll ripple effect and start dismantling, because you'll hear it on the other side is the demand, right? It's always there. So let's start tackling that demand and let's start focusing. We're taking care of the enforcement. Now let's take care of our people inside the U.S.
Victor Avila, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
The State Department is raising the alarm after Malaysia detained dozens of Falun Gong practitioners. The arrest came before and during a visit from Chinese leader Xi Jinping. 2 days before Xi's arrival in mid-April, police officers appeared at a private venue where nearly 80 Falun Gong practitioners had gathered for a routine study of spiritual texts. The officers demanded their IDs and forcibly detained them. Those arrested include a woman older than 80 and a 10-year-old child. The mass arrest marked the first of its kind in Malaysia. The State Department expressed concern about the reports. It called on the CCP to end its nearly 26-year campaign to eradicate Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa. It also demanded that China cease its attempts to pressure other governments to repress the peaceful meditation practice. COVID-19 is making headlines again. The World Health Organization has designated a new strain as a variant under monitoring. This comes as reports indicate a resurgence of the virus in mainland China. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more.
The WHO says the MB181 variant poses a low risk to public health at the global level. Current COVID-19 vaccines are expected to remain effective against this variant, both for symptomatic and severe disease. Although some countries have reported an increase in cases and hospitalizations, the WHO notes there's no evidence that MB181 causes more severe illness than other variants currently in circulation. The WHO defines a variant under monitoring as a COVID-19 strain that may require prioritized attention and monitoring. It's of lower concern than either a variant of interest or a variant of concern. The update comes amid a reported uptick in COVID-19 cases in China. Patients there have described a severe burning throat pain, what locals refer to as razor blade throat, likening the sensation to swallowing shattered glass. The director of the Infectious Diseases Department at a Beijing hospital said the resurgence of COVID-19 is expected to peak sometime late this month. China's Center for Disease Control and Prevention says the MB181 variant is now the dominant strain in the country. Since the pandemic began in 2020, the Chinese Communist Party has faced long-standing accusations of concealing data, particularly regarding the virus's death toll. COVID-19 first emerged in Wuhan, China in late 2019. In April, the Trump administration updated its COVID-19 website to reflect the theory, widely asserted early on, that the virus originated from a high-security virology lab in Wuhan. Meanwhile, the CDC's airport screening program has detected multiple cases of the MB181 variant in the U.S. Records show international travelers arriving in California, Washington, Virginia, and New York have tested positive. Other states, including Hawaii, Ohio, and Rhode Island, have also reported cases that are not linked to airport screenings. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
In a tragic incident in the UK, British police have arrested a man after a car plowed into a crowd during today's victory parade for the Liverpool Football Club. Police say 27 people were taken to the hospital, including 2 who had sustained serious injuries. Another 20 people were treated at the scene for minor injuries. Police say they detained a 53-year-old man who was from the Liverpool area. Police also say they believe it was an isolated incident and they are not treating it as terrorism. It happened as fans had gathered to celebrate the Liverpool Football Club winning the Premier League. Video on social media appears to show the vehicle plowing into pedestrians celebrating on the street. The soccer club says it is in contact with police about the incident. In a statement, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer called the incident appalling and said he is being kept updated on the latest developments. Coming up, a beloved animated film reimagined in live action and one of Hollywood's biggest stars in his final mission. See how the 2 blockbusters fared at the box office during Memorial Day weekend. Does life exist beyond our planet? A new exhibition at London's Natural History Museum explores an extraterrestrial question humans have been asking themselves for thousands of years. More on that when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A record-breaking Memorial Day weekend at the box office. The live-action remake of Lilo and Stitch and the adrenaline-fueled Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning racked up around $500 million in worldwide ticket sales.
Moviegoers flocked to theaters over the Memorial Day weekend to see the live-action remake of Lilo and Stitch and the adrenaline-fueled Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. The two films combined racked up nearly $500 million in worldwide ticket sales and lifted the US and Canadian box office to set a 3-day holiday ticket sales record. The family-friendly Lilo and Stitch also set a domestic box office record for the first 3 days of the long holiday weekend, bringing in around $146 million through Sunday. That is one of the strongest performances for a remake of a Disney animated feature, according to Disney. Meanwhile, Tom Cruise reprising his role as the death-defying spy Ethan Hunt in Mission Impossible pulled in $190 million in global ticket sales, with about a third of that in the US and Canada.
I need you to trust me. One last time.
Those numbers may have been helped by a massive marketing blitz by Paramount in the lead-up to the film's release to promote the culmination of the nearly 3-decade-old film series. The strong holiday weekend haul marks an encouraging start to the summer, which typically accounts for 35% to 40% of the annual domestic box office. It also provides a shot in the arm for theater owners after a dismal March, when ticket sales were down 45% from a year earlier.
Does life exist beyond our planet? A new exhibition at London's Natural History Museum explores an extraterrestrial question humans have been asking themselves for thousands of years. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more on what could be out there.
Opening is towards you on cover 2.
Are human beings alone in the universe? The Natural History Museum in London is investigating the possibility. Space agencies like NASA are searching for the essential chemical requirements needed for life.
Now is a really exciting time to be thinking about life beyond Earth. There's loads of new missions that are either already exploring different places in space, like the Perseverance rover on Mars, or upcoming missions like the Dragonfly mission to Titan.
This is a prototype of the capsule that collected samples from the asteroid Bennu. Scientists recovered evidence such as organic compounds like amino acids and nucleobases from the samples. Exhibition lead Sinead Marin says exhibits like these show progress in understanding life beyond our planet.
I think the whole exhibition is based on the idea that we're more optimistic than ever that life could exist beyond Earth. That the more we learn about the places that life can exist on Earth in really extreme conditions, and the more that these missions go and explore different parts of space, the more signs we find that life could exist, and I'm really optimistic that we might find some kind of evidence of it.
Professor Caroline Smith is head of collections at the Natural History Museum. She says there are some strong candidates for life relatively close to home.
We know that there are some places in our solar system that have the right conditions for life. So Mars has been a great place to investigate the chances of early life on Mars. We know early in Mars's history, it had the right physical environment. It was much warmer than it is now. It had a protective atmosphere. We know there was liquid water on the surface, and we know there was the right chemistry.
The exhibition imagines what these creatures could look like, but Smith cautions against science fiction-like expectations.
So if we ever do find life in space, it's not going to be little green men, it's not going to be E.T. with a glowing finger or a grey thing with big sort of buggy eyes. We're probably talking about simple microbial life. So that's how life started on our own Earth.
Museum and art critic Tabish Khan describes a more fundamental existential question.
So we're fascinated by something we can't achieve. So for us, it's wonderful to think about what could life be like there, because we'll never be there, and also, does life exist elsewhere in the universe? Are we alone in the universe? It's a question we've been asking ourselves for hundreds of years.
Space, could life exist beyond Earth? Runs until February 22nd, 2026. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.